on the housing side again. We've spoken about the rental, but what about what can we build? What are we building? And the 1.2 million homes is there and up in lights, and well, we're not going to meet it, are we?
No, we're not. We're not. It's quite hilarious. So, obviously the government set this fantastical 1.2 million housing target, and we're not even within a cooey's roar of it being met. And, we're currently tracking about 25% below that. That's the run rate. And the National Housing Supply and Affordability Council, I mentioned before, they forecast that over the 5-year National Housing Accord period, which is the 5-year period of this 1.2 million fantastical housing target, they forecast that we miss it by about 265,000. So it's about 22, I think, percent, 25%, something like that. So we're not going to meet it, and it was never going to be met because what that target required was a build rate of 240,000 dwellings per year. Now, I've got a chart which actually shows that it's the middle upper chart there, which shows Albo's fantastical housing target in a red dashed line. So we need 240,000 per year. The blue line is historical, about that's the historical dwelling construction. And the best ever year we had was, I think, 2017. We built 223,600 by memory. That was our biggest year in history of building. And even that was, what was that, 8% below the government's target, which is expected to be hit for 5 consecutive years. And even the National Housing Supply and Affordability, and I'll add, actually, in that 2017 year period when we hit that record, that was when we were building all that crappy high-rise stuff. That's when we had all the really dodgily built high-rise apartments, which, according to the New South Wales Strata Council and other surveys, half the homes that were built during that period, half the apartments complexes suffered from severe defects. So we really dropped quality massively to try and meet that amount of home building, which is something you obviously don't want to do going forward. But the green line there is actually the National Housing Supply and Affordability Council's forecast. So, as I said, they suggest we're going to miss it by 260 odd thousand. We're not going to be anywhere close, and that's why they've come up with that 79,000 housing shortage figure. Simple as that. Now, there is this argument continually about, Australia can just Australia should just build more homes. We just need to approve all these free up approvals, free up planning, and we'll magically build more homes. That's what all our state governments are saying. Well, it's not going to happen, because as the chart on the top left shows from Alex Joyner at IFM Investors, Australia already has a massive dwelling pipeline of homes under construction, right? So these are homes that we approved years ago that are still yet to be built. And that pipeline was sitting at about 252,000 last month. So that's the orange bar there is approved homes that haven't yet commenced, and then there's ones under construction. So effectively, the housing industry can only build so many homes at once. That's all the resources it has. That's all the builders it has. That's all the capacity it has. And at the moment, they are struggling to build what's already been approved. And just below that, there's a chart from CoreLogic that shows the average number of basically the average build time, and that's soared because of this bottleneck problem. We've got all these homes approved. Builders can't churn them out quick enough. They don't have enough workers. They don't have enough materials. They don't have the capacity to build this stuff. So simply approving more homes is akin to adding more water to a full bathtub, right? It's not going to help you, right? You're just going to end up overflowing. Your pipeline's just going to swell even bigger. You're not actually going to get more homes built because we don't have the capacity to build those homes. And there are a whole bunch of other reasons why we can't build these homes. The top middle chart there shows that we've had an explosion in land values. So median lot prices, so lots of land, have increased by about 1/3 since the pandemic. So we've had a massive surge in land costs. On the right of that, the top right chart, we've had about a 40% increase in residential construction costs. So costs have absolutely rocketed since the pandemic. This is all, materials and all that sort of stuff. The middle bottom chart there is the official cash rate. Obviously, we're running a significant, the the cash rate or interest rates are significantly higher than they were at the peak of last decade's housing boom. So when we built that 223,600 homes, the cash rate was 1.5%. Well, now it's what, 3.6%. So even if the RBA cuts a few times, we've still got structurally higher interest rates, which makes it more expensive for developers and also people wanting to buy homes, right? So there's that crimps the ability to build more homes. And finally, the bottom right chart, which comes from Michael Matusik, shows that, you know, the government's dreams of just building all these extra apartments and stuff is not very realistic, because it actually costs a lot more to build apartments than it does detached houses and townhouses. And that's pretty clear in that bottom right chart from Michael Matusik. The cost of building these things is exorbitant. And as a result, the price of new apartments is that the prices of new apartments are typically above what people can actually afford to pay. So in order for developers and builders to turn a profit, they've got to be able to sell here, and people have got to be able to buy that home, and they've still got to have a profit margin. But unfortunately, the price is here, and what people can afford is here. So there's a big gap. And as a result, this whole notion that, you know, policymakers can magically approve a whole bunch of dwellings, you know, free up the planning system, etc., and that'll magically get homes built is just utterly delusional, right? There is a speed limit to how much Australia can build. And yes, you can loosen that speed limit a little bit, like we did last decade when we had that high-rise construction, high-rise apartment boom, but that was under completely different circumstances we've got now. We had much lower building costs. We had much lower land costs. Interest rates were lower, right? And we didn't have builders competing with big build infrastructure projects for labor. We hadn't seen thousands of home builders or construction firms go bankrupt like they have in the last few years, which means you've got less capacity in the industry. And at the same time, we also massively lowered quality last decade. I mentioned we had those huge number of shoddily built high-rise apartments, opal towers, mascot towers, flammable cladding, all those problems that we had last decade. Do we really want to repeat that? Right. So yes, you can probably build a few more homes and do them a little bit quicker, but you're going to be cutting back on quality, and you're going to be building them much cheaper and lower quality and to lower standards. That's the only way you can do it. Whereas the optimal solution is what I've already mentioned, is to just cut immigration. If you cut immigration, you don't need as many homes, and you can actually take your time building those homes. And you can make them better quality if you don't have to build them so quickly to meet this massive population growth. That's why I think if we merely cut immigration back to the levels it was in the early 2000s, around 130,000 a year, which is what it was before they ramped it up. You know, I'm talking the period between 2000 and 2004, we would be a far, far better system. And if we made sure that that 130,000 net overseas migrants we got in were predominantly highly skilled, like the ones we actually need, like, you know, more home builders, and, you know, in areas of genuine skills shortage and genuinely skilled people that we need, we'd have a much better migration system, because it'd be not just more highly productive, it'd actually fill genuine skill shortages, but it would also take the pressure off housing and infrastructure, right? We can't solve this issue of, you know, the housing shortage and infrastructure problems and everything else if we keep fire hosing demand, extra demand in every single year. It's not mathematically possible for Australia to build enough housing when we continue to import hundreds of thousands of extra people into the country every year that need housing. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. So if you want to solve this problem, you've got to import far less, and you've got to make sure that the people you import are actually genuinely skilled and people you actually need, rather than low skilled and working in jobs that are low productivity and not filling genuine skill shortages, which is basically the system we've got at the moment. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and just to underscore, the average price to build a low rise is much lower than to build a high rise, because you have to, of course, put more steel and, you know, dig down and all those things.
Yeah, lifts and reinforcing, and you know, it's far more complicated.
It takes a lot longer. So the typical duration is also longer, and the planning cycle is longer. And so they're going to freeze a construction code, or that'll make make a huge difference,
Oh,
right? And all of
AI, Martin. Did you hear that one about
yeah,
AI? So
yeah,
the latest brain fart is we're going to have AI to. So it's just robo debt all over again, right? It's
yes,
robo debt type stuff. So we're going to have AI now just to approve planning. Yeah, we're going to have artificial intelligence improve planning permits and stuff. Well, again, even if that happens, and even if we assume that it worked and didn't end up with bad outcomes, which it probably would, right? You still got the problem. We don't have enough capacity to actually build the homes.
yeah,
And that's
exactly.
why I've got these swelling pipeline. Like if we had the capacity, we wouldn't have this massive bloated pipeline of homes under construction or awaiting construction. That would have already been built. So, this whole thing just does not make sense. And this is why it drives me up the wall every time I hear a politician or the media or a migration shill or, whoever just say, oh, it's supply, supply, supply. It's all supply. We just need to boost supply. Because it's almost like economists or commentators in Australia they don't see the two sides of the equation, right? All they see is one side of the economic equation, which is supply. When it suits them, of course. It's just like there's a demand side, guys. And when it comes to housing, the biggest demand side is the number of people you import who need housing. It's not rocket science, right? If you're going to import a Canberra or you're going to grow the population by Canberra every year, well, you better make sure that you've got a Canberra worth of homes that can be built to accommodate that Canberra worth of people every year. But of course, we don't have that. And we never have. So you wonder why there's a housing shortage. You wonder why they've got this structural rental shortage that, as I mentioned earlier, is only forecast to get much, much worse over the next 5 years. It's because our idiots in the federal government want to keep fire hosing more and more people into the country. And they've got no intention of stopping at all. Like the Centre for Population's own forecast, as I said, 13.5 million people in the next 40 years. Another Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. What do you think is going to happen? Not going to be able to build enough homes or infrastructure, and living standards are going to crash. It's as simple as that.